Nested loops. In this video, we will represent nested loop processes. Writing nested loops. A nested loop is a loop that appears inside the body of another loop. When a loop is nested inside of another loop, the nested or inner loop must complete all of its iterations before the outer loop can continue on to the next iteration. For example, in a regular for loop, in this case, with this specific header, we know that I gets initialized to 0. Then in the next iteration, it becomes 1. Then it becomes 2. Then 3. Then 4. Then the Boolean fails and the for loop is finished. Now, suppose I were to put a for loop inside of that for loop, right, with a different loop control variable. Well, we know first off for the outer for loop, I will be initialized to 0. And once that happens, we come inside the for loop where we enter another for loop where j, the second control variable, gets to equal to 0. So now we got to complete this inside for loop. So j is set to 0, then it becomes 1, then it becomes 2, then 3, then 4, before finally becoming 5 and causing the Boolean expression to fail, thus completing the inner for loop. Once the inner for loop is complete, now we can go back to the outer for loop, the header for that. I becomes 1, then we're back inside. J is set back to 0, then it becomes 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then it's finished. It's back outside. I becomes 2, back inside. J reset back to 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then finished. Back outside. I equals 3, back inside. J is reset to 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then it's finished. Back outside, I is 4, back inside, j is 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. Inner for loop is complete, and also the outer for loop, now complete. Now let's demonstrate this with actual complete code. Okay? So in this code above that's in front of you, we see there inside the inner for loop is a print statement that prints out the word in, just to indicate that we're inside the inner for loop. Then there's a second statement that's only in the outer for loop, and it prints the word out, just to indicate that we're only in the outer for loop. Right. So let's execute. So we start by setting I equals to 0, since that's the loop control variable of the outer for loop. Then we come inside, where j is initialized to 0. Then we come inside the inner for loop, we print the word in, then that completes one iteration, j becomes 1, print the word in again. That completes another iteration. J is now 2, then print the word in again. Then now that completes the inner for loop. So we exit that, go on to the next statement where we print the word out, and that completes the outer for loop. Now I becomes 1, back inside, J gets reset to 0. Back inside the inner for loop, print the word in, J becomes 1, print the word in again, J becomes 2, print the word in again. Inner for loop complete. On to the next statement, print the word out, and that completes that second iteration for the outer for loop. I is not equal to 2, we come back inside, j is reset to 0. Inside the inner for loop, we print the word in, then j becomes 1, print the word in again, j becomes 2, print the word in again, then the inner for loop is complete. On to the next line, we print the word out, and that completes another iteration of the outer for loop. Now I is 3, j reset to 0. Inside the inner for loop, print the word in. J becomes 1. Print the word in again. J becomes 2. Print the word in a third time. Okay? And that completes the inner for loop. Come outside. We print the word out. And that completes the final iteration of the outer for loop.